The commercialization and structural evolution of the Internet. As long as the Internet remained a government-managed enterprise, the NSF-sponsored Internet could carry only traffic from the research community, not for commercial purposes. In the late 1980s, the NSF decided to privatize the operations of a piece of the Internet it managed, while the military did not privatize its piece. One key motivation for initiating this action was achievement of economies of scale, namely, the reduction in costs that administrators anticipated would emerge if researchers shared infrastructure with private users, and if competitive processes drove private firms to innovate. The transition reached resolution by the mid-1990s. Many of the events that followed determined the structure of supply of Internet infrastructure for the next decade and a half, particularly in the United States. The first group of backbone providers in the United States, i.e. MCI, Sprint, UNet, BBN, had been the largest carriers of data in the NSF network. In 1995 and 1996, any regional internet service provider, ISP, could exchange traffic with them. At that time, the backbone of the U.S. Internet resembled a mesh, with every large firm both interconnecting with every other and exchanging traffic with smaller firms. Some of these firms owned their own fiber, e.g., MCI, and some of them ran their backbones on fiber rented from others, e.g., UUNet. After 1997, a different structure began to take shape. It was partly a mesh and partly hierarchical, using tiers to describe a hierarchy of suppliers. Tier 1 providers were national providers of backbone services and charged a fee to smaller firms to interconnect. The small firms were typically ISPs that ranged in size and scale from wholesale regional firms down to the local ISP handling a small number of dial-in customers. Tier 1 firms did most of what became known as transit data services, passing data from one ISP to another ISP, or passing from a content firm to a user. In general, money flowed from customers to ISPs, who treated their interconnection fees with backbone firms as a cost of doing business. Tier 1 firms adopted a practice known as peering, and it appeared to reinforce the hierarchical structure. Peering involved the removal of all monetary transfers at a point where two Tier 1 providers exchanged traffic. Peering acknowledged the fruitlessness of exchanging money for bilateral data traffic flows of nearly equal magnitude at a peering point. Hence, it lowered transaction costs for the parties involved. However, because their location and features were endogenous, and large firms that denied peering to smaller firms would demand payment instead, many factors shaped negotiations. As a result, the practice became controversial. An open and still unresolved policy-relevant economic question is whether peering merely reflects a more efficient transaction for large-scale providers or reflects the market power of large suppliers providing additional competitive advantages which smaller firms or non-Tier 1 firms cannot imitate. The economics of peering is quite challenging to characterize generally, so this question has received a range of analysis. Another new feature of Internet infrastructure also began to emerge at this time: third-party caching services. For example, Akamai, a caching company, would pay ISPs to locate its servers within key points of an ISP's network. Content providers and other hosting companies would then pay the caching companies to place copies of their content on such services in locations geographically close to users, aspiring to reduce delays for users. Users would be directed to the servers instead of the home site of the content provider and thus receive faster response to queries. A related type of service, a content delivery network, CDN, provided similar services for electronic retailers. In general, these became known as overlays, and since these were not part of the original design of the non-commercial Internet, numerous questions emerged about how overlays altered the incentives to preserve end-to-end principles. These changes also raised an open question about whether a mesh still determined most economic outcomes. For much Internet service in urban areas, the answer appeared to be yes. ISPs had options from multiple backbone providers and multiple deliverers of transit IP services, and many ISPs multi-homed to get faster services from a variety of backbone providers. ISPs also had multiple options among cache and CDN services. Evidence suggests that prices for long-distance data transmission in the United States continued to fall after the backbone privatized, reflecting excess capacity and lower installation costs. For internet service outside of urban areas, the answer appeared to be no. ISPs did not have many options for middle-mile transit services, and users did not have many options for access services. The high costs of supply made it difficult to change these conditions. Perhaps no factor altered the structure of supply of internet infrastructure after commercialization more than the World Wide Web. The World Wide Web emerged just as privatization began, and it is linked with a particularly important invention, the commercial browser. As the commercial internet grew in the mid to late 1990s, traffic affiliated with the web overtook electronic mail, symptomatic of web applications as the most popular on the internet. The growth in traffic had not been anticipated at the time NSF made plans for privatizing the backbone, and the subsequent growth in traffic fueled a global investment boom in internet infrastructure. Tim Berners-Lee built key parts of the World Wide Web. In 1991, he made 3 inventions available on shareware sites for free downloading: HTML, Hypertext Markup Language, the URL, Universal Resource Locator, and HTTP, Hypertext Transfer Protocol, a hypertext language and labeling system that made transfer of textual and non-textual files easier. By 1994, and after the plans for commercialization were set and implemented, a new browser design emerged from the University of Illinois. It was called Mosaic, and it was widely adopted in the academic internet. Mosaic became the model that inspired the founding of Netscape, the first successful commercial browser, which also motivated Microsoft to develop Internet Explorer, which touched off the browser wars. As of this writing, most observers expect data traffic to continue to grow at rates in the neighborhood of 40% to 50% a year. This is due to the emergence of another set of applications. Data supporting peer-to-peer and video applications have been growing rapidly after the millennium, each year using larger fractions of available capacity.